So women will look at issues differently, more empathy, more compassion, and with a view to finding solutions, usually.
We should not focus on the feminist point because it is again, the categorization of gender. And mindset needs to be changed. That is important.
Our society needs women to be more numerous in decision-making positions and in entrepreneurial areas. We always have to pass a twofold test, unquote.
The feminist foreign policy. People are talking, why do you need a feminist foreign policy? Right? That is not required. Why it is not required? Because you have to understand that foreign policy is something that women also understand.
And I'm sure in peacemaking and sustainable development, in every way we find that women are much more able to contribute because they come with a new perspective. I think women to join the foreign service, but of course you have to have a passion.
Hello and welcome to Forum for Global Studies. I'm Dr. Sandeep Tripathi. Today we have with us a very distinguished panel to speak on a roundtable titled Women in Diplomacy, Past, Present and Future. It is an honor for us to have such a distinguished panel to speak on such an important topic. And on behalf of the Forum for Global Studies, I extend my warm welcome to my esteemed guest for today's program. First of all, I would like to introduce the first speaker, Ambassador Manju Seth, ma'am. Ambassador Manju Seth has been India's ambassador to Madagascar and Comoros. She has worked in different diplomatic positions in different countries, such as Paris, Bangkok, Dhaka, and of course, in the Ministry of External Affairs in Delhi. And she writes regularly for the top newspapers like the Financial Express, Indian Express, The Wire, and she appears also as a leading media channels in English both. So we are very fortunate to have you, ma'am, for today's roundtable. And particularly the topic is very important, women in diplomacy. And you have been practitioner from India. And so today I'm happy to know your insights. How does it work? And what your experience has been during your service tenure. So thank you so much for joining today. Now, second speaker we have with us, Dr. Manjari Singh. She is an assistant professor at Amity Institute of International Studies, Amity University. She holds PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University. She has authority on Middle East. She has authored and co-authored top books from the top publisher, Routledge Palgrave, on Middle East. And she writes regularly for the Times of India, The Wire, The Economic Times. And as a young scholar, she is the India's voice on Middle East. So thank you so much, Dr. Manjari Singh, for having today in today's roundtable program and to speak on women in diplomacy, such a very important topic. So I think today, the last speaker, Dr. Amna, is not joined so far. So we can start now. Ambassador Manju, ma'am, now the floor is yours to speak on the important topic, women in diplomacy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much for having me on this roundtable. Because along with these very young and, very learned, should I say, because all PhDs and doing such interesting work and, they're teaching, so they're really up there. And you yourself, of course, are an expert on Russia, as I understand. And, all of you also, I think, are really, really, very, very learned, I should say, in comparison. But at the same time, yes, we are practitioners. So it's nice to be here and to be speaking on this very interesting subject of women in diplomacy, past, present, and future. As you are well aware, the UN had designated the 24th of June as the International Day of Women in Diplomacy. Okay, I think it's a very good thing. At least it brings awareness, etc. But at the same time, it also is indicative of the silencing or the invisibilizing of women in diplomacy, because men are everywhere. Stories about men are told in much greater detail and in much greater with greater enthusiasm. And I also find that women diplomats are not as prolific in writing about themselves and their journeys, and neither are other people who are writing about diplomacy or writing about women or writing about diplomacy in general. They do not talk much about the achievements of the women in diplomacy, not only in India, but all worldwide. I find not very many articles. Of course, it has changed over the years quite a bit, but still, for instance, the number of books you would find by male diplomats and by others on male diplomats is much, much more than what we find on women diplomats. And I think there's a reason for that also. I think it could be that women are generally a little more low profile in that sense, or they don't want to show off, or they don't talk too much about themselves. Of course, it's changing, but in general, you hesitate to talk about yourself. It's a more of a traditional, conditioning. Women generally do hesitate. Of course, there are exceptions. I'm not saying everyone is like that, but in general, there's a little hesitancy on the part of women to talk about themselves and to promote themselves. But of course, it has changed in today's world, and things are changing very rapidly. We have come a long way from where we were when the Foreign Service's first woman diplomat, Miss Mutamma, joined in 1949, and to now, where we have really come a long way, and all our and each set of women diplomats, at least in India and in other countries, I'm sure as well, have opened the way, have paved the way, and opened doors for the other subsequent women diplomats who have come into the service or and joined diplomacy. So it has been a gradual change, but definitely a meaningful change. And at the same time, when we look at the numbers, yes, it used to be hardly 10% of the total intake, or even less sometimes. I understand that one of the years in 1977, I'm told, it was a very large batch, and suddenly, normally 10 and 12, people were taken into the Foreign Service. But in that particular, I think the number was 24 or 26, and there was not a single woman in that, not a single lady officer. So sometimes even that you will see that not a single person was there. But now, in today's time, I believe that last year, I think it was, where there were 14 girls who had joined the Foreign Service, I think in numbers of 32 or 34 or something. So it's a big change. So 34% of the intake was, women. But at the same time, the fact that, there is a number of women are increasing, it doesn't necessarily mean that their say in policy making or formulation has increased proportionately. I think it is, if you look over the years, women in foreign policy and implementation or formulation have been there, of course. Many of our seniors have really contributed, immensely to formulating of policy. But it has been, I feel, in my view, it has been a bit of a struggle in some ways, and you are constantly trying to, prove that you are just as good. That it is not very, it's not that it is very open, but subtly sometimes these feelers come to you that, maybe you are not absolutely what you should be. You're not one of us. As a matter of fact, in the initial days when I joined, I remember one of my senior lady officers told me, you ought to be one of the boys, if you want to succeed here. So I said, why should I be one of the boys? I couldn't understand, and I didn't want to understand. I mean, I thought I'm one of the girls, so why should I be one of the boys in any case? But anyway, that has again changed now over the years. But that mindset, I think, is reflective of women in diplomacy. When you have to compete and be one of the boys, I think then that is a big setback for women's voices, because then you are trying to be like them. And there's absolutely no need to be like the others, because you are yourself. You have to speak up for what you stand for. And I think that has been there. And that is why we know that we have come a long way. Women in diplomacy have come a long way. We've had 3 foreign secretaries, I think one in 2000 and 2001 was Mrs. Chokila Iyer for the first time. Then Mrs. Nirupama Rao in 2001, and I think Mrs. Sujata Singh in 2013, I think she came. So each one of them did bring value, did bring their contribution to formulation and implementation of foreign policy. But having said that, I will also say that, it is said that diplomacy is actually implementing foreign policy. They're the implementers, whereas the actual formulation takes place at the political level. Of course, we give inputs, but actual formulation takes place at the political level. And in the political level, we have seen, unfortunately, that I don't recall, except Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, there's been no other lady foreign minister in all these years. And unfortunately, from what I could understand, Mrs. Swaraj was not given, should I say, the due powers or the due powers, I will say, to make a big difference in foreign policy. She was excellent and she spoke very well. She had very good ideas, but I think she was not given, I think, that space to be a powerful, formulator of foreign policy, I think. So and now we had Minister of State also, Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi. In her case also, I got the impression that she very well spoken, very good ideas, and she had very good, and I've interacted with her, I had the opportunity to interact with her a couple of times. But I saw that again in the foreign policy, though I'm not in the ministry, but as an outsider, as an outside observer, I did feel that she wasn't given that space again to make a difference in formulation of foreign policy. So having all these things make me wonder where progress has been. How much have we actually progressed? We have progressed a great deal, but not yet. And a lot needs to be done. One more point that from my own experience, I will give a few points. When I came, the rules when Mrs. Muthamma was there, that you couldn't get married at all. So she had to fight and she didn't get married. The 2 who wanted to get married had to leave service. So that has changed. And because of people like her, that things changed. I remember when I joined, I was in administration and I saw these rules, which were so discriminatory, absolutely discriminatory. It said that you would get half the foreign allowance if you're married within the service. The wife would get half and not the husband. Husband would get full. If you're both foreign service officers, the husband would get full foreign allowance, the wife would not. I mean, the minute I read that, I was totally, shocked, taken aback. And we were, we had a good team and we were able to push through the minister. Everybody was, on board. The Administrative Reforms Commission had been set up and they said, send us what you want done. And everything was done on a fast basis, on a fast track basis. So we were able to get those rules amended. And including that if you are both of you are in the service, then only the husband will get a car loan to buy a car. The wife will not. So, all these kind of rules, we got them changed, and there are a number of few others, which I'm happy to say that I was instrumental in many ways to look at that. And so women will look at issues differently, more empathy, more compassion, and with a view to finding solutions, usually. And so women in diplomacy are very important. Women in formulation of policy are very important. And I'm sure in peacemaking and sustainable development, in every way, we find that women are much more able to contribute because they come with a new perspective. I think men have got used to a particular way of doing things, and it's been passed down for generations. So usually, not all, there are many exceptions, of course, but in general, as a generalization, if you look, there'd be very few who will really look at things differently or notice that there is some discrimination somewhere. So I think that. So that women, the role of women in diplomacy or in any administrative functioning in any way, I think is very important because they bring a new outlook, a new perspective, and a new approach. And I think that is important. And they bring, as I would like to add, the feminine touch. People are talking of feminist foreign policy, but for feminist foreign policy, I seem to, I mean, whatever I read about it or know a little bit about it, I think it's not really a very valid or a very useful, term. Because what do you mean by feminist foreign policy? Are you going to isolate women on one side and say only policies of this kind should be put in? So I don't think that is a very, very valid thing. I think what we need to look at is a more inclusive foreign policy, which includes everybody and not feminist in that sense. So I think that is another point that I wanted to make. And do I have time?
Yes, ma'am.
Do I have time?
Yes,
Okay.
you can continue.
Pardon?
Ma'am, you can continue, ma'am.
Okay. Then a few more things that I wanted to talk about. It's the transformations that have come, or have taken place over the years have been many. I have seen many of these transformations in participation of women in diplomacy. But one or two experiences I'd just like to share. For instance, the mindset or the patriarchal thinking is so strong that without thinking, people, come up with certain things. For instance, when I was in Bangkok, when I was interacting with my counterparts, if they were male, they wouldn't. I mean, though Thailand didn't have that kind of discriminatory attitude, but they somehow were not comfortable interacting with me. But when that person was replaced by a lady in the Foreign Office, of course, the interaction and the connection is of course stronger between two women and two men that way. But definitely because I was female, I found sometimes that they didn't really want to interact with me. They didn't want to interact. And once or twice when I was there in meetings with my ambassador, we had gone, and this my counterpart in the Foreign Office, when she was a lady, when the man was there and when the lady was there, I saw the difference. When the man was there, the boy was there, and we had gone for a meeting, his boss called his secretary to come and serve tea, but to everybody, or coffee, whatever. But when this lady counterpart of mine was there, after a year or so, another meeting, he looked at her to make the coffee. I was shocked. I said, she is such a senior officer, and you never told your male colleague when he was your male subordinate, and now you're asking her just because she's a girl, that's her role to make coffee. I was really shocked. So this kind of thing was really a surprise for me. So when we talk of feminist thing, I don't think it should be feminist foreign policy. Mindsets need to change, and everybody at every level needs to rethink and readdress and reassess what they are doing, what they are saying. Because this is very strange, that you expect your lady colleague to make the coffee, or serve the coffee rather. Then similarly, another incident which comes to my mind is when I was in Paris. I'd gone for a conference, and interestingly, the invitation has come in my name. Everything was there, and I went for that. And I had taken one of my junior colleagues along, because they said in case you require full French speaking or something. So one of my junior colleagues who was French speaking, I'd taken him along, and it was very strange. When he went and said, we are from the embassy, we had gone out of Paris, we were not in Paris. They all went to him and said, yes, sir, please come, sir, come. And they took him on that. So it was very strange, And they assumed that from the embassy, it has to be a male. This lady must be his assistant. So it was a very funny assumption. And poor fellow was so embarrassed, he quickly came and said, sorry, she's the counselor, not me. Please, then he said, we are sorry. But, and this I saw in France quite a lot, much more than in Thailand. Strangely, in France, even till when we were there, salaries of women employees, even in the government, were less as compared to the men of similar rank. It was still there, though there was a lot of protest and they were trying to change it, but I haven't followed up and kept track whether it has actually changed now. And so, these things are so ingrained, people don't even think about it. So this was one strange experience that I had, that, you've invited a Ms. and a male is coming, you've taken, and he just said, we are from the embassy, and you quickly say, yes, please come on the stage. So without even looking at what is his name, whom have we invited, the organizers. So it is assumed it'll be a male. So that's another problem which exists. The assumptions, the patriarchal assumptions, and the patriarchal approach to everything, including foreign policy. And one last incident that I'd just like to recall: when I was ambassador, in Madagascar, we hosted the Republic Day reception. Morning we have the flag hoisting. Evening, I hosted the reception, or afternoon, whatever. So at this reception, normally what we do, we stand at the entrance and welcome everybody in, and my sort of office people would escort them and wherever to take them. They would go and mingle with everybody else. Now there were two people who came, from local people, who told my number two, was with me, the second, my deputy. They kept telling him, why isn't the ambassador here? We'd like to meet the ambassador at the entrance. So he said, yes, she's Madam Ambassadress. Yes, she's Madam Ambassadress. We want to meet the ambassador. They kept saying, this is her husband, Mr. He's Monsieur Ambassador. She's Madam Ambassador. Again, that person said, no. But and as it happened the second time, then somebody called my husband and he had gone. And this gentleman insisted that he wanted to convey a message to the ambassador. And my deputy kept telling him, she is the Madam Ambassador. But he wouldn't listen. He just wanted to speak to a male. Finally, I don't know what my deputy told him. I just stopped discussing with him and I went on to the next guest. But it was something very strange that they did not want to, and they know that the invitation has gone from a lady ambassador. Everything is, they know that there's a lady ambassador from India. But no, even then, I think the mindset is so strong that they don't even think before reacting. Anyway, so that was one incident. And then last point that I'd like to make is the glass ceiling, the glass ceiling that exists. But I'm very happy to say that has changed. And as I said, 3 foreign secretaries were women. And for the first time, we had Ruchira Kamboj as our ambassador to the UN. And similarly, to some other to the US, we had to important places. Because earlier, women were completely ruled out from the important postings. But that has changed, and I think it's for the better. And one last point for the future. Now where is the future going? There's still a lot of hesitation. I participate sometimes in these mentoring and mock interviews for the aspirants, for the UPSC aspirants sometimes. So many of them, women especially, even men actually for that matter, but very few women give foreign service as their choice. Even amongst the boys. Mainly it's IS, IRS, and the other Indian service within India, IPS. For foreign service, it will be like 1 in 20 or 1 in 30 or something. So very few are looking at foreign service as a first choice, or even as a second choice in some cases. So one of the girls asked me, how did you go? Why did you, how is it okay for us to join, and how difficult will it be? I said, you have to have a passion for it. You have to have a passion for work, for the foreign, or for this diplomatic life. And there's balancing everywhere. And you have to, I think, do something. Should be able to, that passion should be there to represent your country and be an ambassador for your country. I mean, at whatever level, you don't become ambassador the first day, but you're still an ambassador for your country. You're representing your country abroad. So you have to have that passion and that feeling that I need to do this. Then only foreign service is for you, because there are many downsides to the foreign service for women, little more for the women than for men. As one of my ambassadors used to say, lady ambassadors, she was a great mentor for me. I learned a lot from her. Women don't have wives. Mostly men have wives. Of course, sometimes, they are married to each other sometimes, and the wife, but still the onus is usually on the wife to run the house, to manage the house, or even whatever your progress is. All that is also a contribution by women, is a factor why women hesitate to join the foreign service. I think I will end there, and I would only like to before I end, I would just like to make a last thing. It is a very good service. I've had a very good career, and I think little bit of ups and downs. But I would really encourage women to join the foreign service. But of course, you have to have a passion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And the kind of experience you have shared, it's extremely important for all of us to rethink the kind of narratives, the discourses we generally teach in the classes to students, feminist foreign policies. And you rightly mentioned that we should not focus on the feminist foreign policy because it is again, the categorization of gender. If we talk one section, and you rightly pointed out that yes, we must focus on inclusive approach, and mindset needs to be changed. That is important. So thank you so much, ma'am. Your experience and the kind of experience you have here, as well as you also focus that it's not a matter of pressure, it's a matter of passion. If you choose IFS career as a passion, it's not pressure. So it's good to know, and I think our viewers will be benefited from your experience, and because you have been practitioner and you have faced so many discrimination during that time. Even it was a very even the France country which claims vibrant democracy and all that, right? So there is also a kind of a discrimination in Madagascar you have here. So yes, I believe that your interpretation, your experience will matter to even to policymakers also. That policy is not only important. I think practice is also important. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today we have with us a late join Professor Dr. Amna Mirza. Ma'am, you are most welcome to FGS and this roundtable program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sandeep Tripathi. My greetings to Ambassador Manju Seth also, and all our participants, delegates who are there with us online, as well as who will be watching our program later at various new media platforms. Once again, my greetings, namaskar, and thank you so much. And as we reflect on women's important contribution in diplomacy, as we reflect on the commemoration of International Day of Women in Diplomacy, I'm, of course, with all the important insights Manju ma'am presented to us, Ambassador Manju ma'am, I would like to begin with a very important remark that was made by Cristina Fernandez de Krishna, who's an Argentinian lawyer and also a Peronist politician. She's also been, she also became the first female elected president of Argentina. And what she says are some very important words. Our society needs women to be more numerous in decision-making positions and in entrepreneurial areas. We always have to pass a twofold test, unquote. Now, as reflecting on from the very important, perspectives that man also shared with us about the challenges that pertain to women in diplomacy and foreign affairs thereof, and what the former Argentinian President Cristina Fernandez also said, that there's a twofold test. Now, let's reflect on what is this twofold test and why, as this twofold test actually pertains. Now, as an academician, we're going to be focusing more on the theoretical side, but of course, which has a very strong bearing on the practical side too. We all know that foreign affairs, foreign policy, international relations as a young discipline has been perceived in the manner of, the realist narrative. That is power, what is, not just focusing on morals as that is what ought to be. Now, looking at the context of end of First World War, the First World War paving way for the Second World War, the end of Second World War paving way for the Cold War. Of course, international relations, that's what makes international relations, get the focus towards the real politics. That is national interest, power. And sadly, within this, there is like a bias assumption where how we see that is national interest, power is something which is about valor. It is about courage. And somewhere the entire biological binary of women does not fit into this narrative of masculine power, of masculine national interest. So that was explained that one of the first tests, that is of how biased assumptions, they hinder the presence, the ideas of women. Then how this entire domain of international relations has a masculine overtone, wherein women somewhere are disadvantaged, they are marginalized, and there is not appropriate representation. So, in this process of marginalization, in this process of exclusivist narrative, women have to exist in the bigger role of diplomacy, amongst others. Now, in fact, Manju ma'am was actually pointing out that how, when we look at foreign service too, there's a dichotomy between the permanent executive and the political executive. So in that aspect, it's very important to look at the challenges that are there in the foreign affairs apparatus, and to add to that how foreign affairs in the bigger contextual forces too, it is getting problematic. It is getting much more multi-layered. For example, today foreign affairs is just not about diplomacy. It is just not about military power, but it is about economic power. It is about health security. It is about climate change. It is about 4.0. It is about technological power. So in that aspect, it is very important to understand that we must factor in that, yes, women today have come a long way when we look at diplomacy. The realm of international relations too is witnessing change. For example, there are 31 countries where women serve as head of states, to quote the data till January 2023. So yes, there have been benefits to diplomacy. And the idea that diplomacy is an exclusive preserve of men only is an important question, as well as this is being simultaneously questioned too. So yes, as Ambassador Manju Seth pointed out, there's a need to redress, there's a need to build big bridges, and there's a need for positive change. So I'll put my ideas in a very short manner that yes, women have played an important role in diplomacy, but there's a need to redress and build and work towards positive empowerment.
Yes, Dr. Manji, now you are most welcome to speak on this topic.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Sandeep, for inviting me to this auspicious gathering. And I'm thankful to Ambassador ma'am for her views. And, she has been in the services, so she knows a lot about what we are going to talk about. And she has very beautifully summed up everything. So I'm just going to repeat a few of what she has already pointed out. She has very correctly pointed out that, diplomacy remains to be, a male-dominated kind of a field for a very long time. And I was just going through a report that has come, an index that has come, which quantifies women in diplomacy. And it says that only 20.5% of the women today are in diplomacy. So that is a very staggering figure, if you look at it, which means that 70.5% of the people in diplomacy, or, making any effort in diplomacy, are all men. So, that kind of gives you an idea about what is exactly happening. The problem here is not just about the representation, it is about the recognition. And she has very beautifully pointed out that, like the feminist foreign policy, people are talking, why do you need a feminist foreign policy? Right? That is not required. Why it is not required? Because you have to understand that foreign policy is something that women also understand. International politics is also something that is the women understand, right? So that recognition is important. Not just women in diplomacy are discriminated, but also the women teaching diplomacy in international politics, they are also being discriminated. I was in one of the forums, I'm not going to name them, and it was a women-oriented forum. They were celebrating the contribution of women in various fields, and they were surprised to see a woman talking about international politics. Why are you surprised? Why are you surprised that, a woman cannot talk about international politics? Us women, we are not thinking as women when we are, assigned a role. We are thinking as a person. But this thought process comes from the society. So that is what needs to be changed, So not just in diplomacy, but everywhere else also, this discrimination against women is because of the fact that women are seen as a gender. This gender is a socially constructed, norm. It has not, they don't have to be seen from that angle, but that surprisingly, it is happening right now. So women in diplomacy is not my area, or diplomacy, this section is not my area of expertise. So I was reading one article before joining this forum, and I chanced upon one of the articles which says that, the first international charter, the first international document that talked about the equality of women and men was the UN Charter itself. And there was a discrimination in that as well, in the sense that, when the charter was being framed in 1945, one of the leaders, there were only 3 representation from that too, not from the West, from the East. There was a woman called as a leader who was called as Berta Lutz. So she was one of the Brazilian ambassadors, and she was the leader of the, women's side. And she was asked not to talk about women's rights in the UN Charter. I mean, that is really disappointing to acknowledge that she was asked that, you should not ask such vulgar questions that, women's rights should be talked about. So this has been the situation. And the fact that, after so many years in 2022, we realize that our women in diplomacy need to be acknowledged for their work. It is disturbing enough. We should be concerned about why it took so many years, because there were so many women who have already served in the foreign services and otherwise in diplomatic efforts, have taken diplomatic efforts to bring in some change in the foreign policies of the countries. So that has, that sea change is required. So we have a long road to still, cross. And with this, I want to say that, what are the problem areas? Why are there problems when it comes to representation and recognition of women in diplomacy, not just as officers, but also as, as women who are teaching diplomacy or who are, part of diplomacy through other angles. The first and foremost problem is the cultural bias. It's there in the home, it's there in the workplace, work environment, and it is there in the services as well. So that cultural bias that is there, oh, she's a woman, she will not be able to do it. Or the fact that if she gets married, what will happen then? There will be a gap. She'll have something else to think about than the services. So that kind of cultural bias is one of the major constraints why women in diplomacy are not acknowledged as much as they should be. I mean, when I was reading this article, it said that in earlier times, the women as ambassadors or the women in foreign services, they were asked to leave the job after they got married. I mean, I don't know how true it is, but when I got to know about it, I was like, this is hilarious. You have to leave the job once you get married. So that's the kind of thing that is happening. The second problem is that the institutional, constraints. The institutional constraints are important because, and ma'am was very, rightly pointing about the hesitancy of the women. See, if I talk about my accomplishments more, what will my male colleagues feel? Or rather, let me put it, how will my other colleagues feel? That, oh, she's showing off. She's talking so much about herself, okay. So that hesitancy comes from not because you are ashamed of what your achievements, but because what the other people will feel, they'll feel inferior to you, that kind of thing. And then that inferiority will lead to something else. It will lead to you getting constrained in some area, you getting not acknowledged for your work. So that kind of thing is also there. The third thing constraint that is there is the gender related violence. Like, in most of the, like right now, people are talking about the women's role in peace building and conflict resolution. And ma'am has served in, African countries. So she would know that, in Africa, the women have played a very enormous role, especially at the grassroots levels, in peace building and conflict resolution measures. So in those aspects also, the thing that goes in, when we send our women to conflict areas, the point that is there, oh, how will she survive? There may be some gendered violence against the women. So that kind of thing is also one of the constraints that, women in diplomacy have not gotten the kind of, place that they should be getting otherwise. So these are the issues. But what is happening right now is with the advent and the growing impetus to public diplomacy, there are more and more women from various other fields also who are being recognized. It's not like the image is all grim. It is changing over a period of time. Right now, what is happening even in academics, women in certain area studies, they're also gaining some impetus, because of their work, because of their contributions to international politics. So all of that is changing. And now when delegations, when the track 2 dialogues also happen, I have also been part of some of the track 2 dialogues and some of track 1.5 dialogues. There is a women perspective that is taken into consideration. Women are, but this aspect is not because of the women perspective per se, but because of the fact that the women have worked on those areas. For example, if I'm working on Israel, if I'm working on Middle East, that is my contribution. So I'm not in that forum, in that track 2 dialogue or track 1.5 dialogue because I'm a woman, but I am because I contribute to the area studies. So that is one thing. The third thing that is happening is, there is another aspect to it also that in 2021, 2022, if I'm not wrong, one of the online panels, it was all male-oriented. And it was called out by some of the international experts in India as well as outside that it was termed as manalist. This panel is a manalist because it is only, there's no woman in the panelists, in the panel, and especially when they're talking about women international studies. So that kind of thing changed the dynamics to now people finding out women, okay, who can be called? So, just for representation, that's just for the symbolic representation, one should not be inviting women to, certain forums. You should be inviting them because of their contribution, because the change that they have brought in the discourse. So that is my take on the subject. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manjari Singh, for your insights and the kind of experience also you said, because you have been part of some diplomatic part and Egypt's track to diplomacy. And so thank you so much for your insights. And I think I would like to sum up this roundtable. Dr. Amna Mirza has left, but all three, one is practitioner and two academician. This kind of insights would be very, very significant for our viewers. And I hope that in future we will continue this, organize this kind of program. Thank you so much, Ambassador Manju ma'am. Thank you so much, Dr. Manjari, for coming, for joining. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.